All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for logging in. Today, I want to start the conversation with the theme of imperfection. It kind of goes without saying that we're living in the middle of a situation that is unlike anything any of us has ever experienced. And one of the things that's driving me most crazy right now is the number of times we're hearing the word unprecedented every day. It really makes me want to scream. It's so repeated, and we all know that we're in the middle of this crisis, and just hearing those things repeated over and over again seems almost obvious at this point. But we're living in the middle of this unusual situation, and that's new for everybody, and we're all trying to figure it out. And I just wanted to talk about that moment that we're in, and imperfection was a word that rose to the surface for me and really started to resonate because we're all trying to find our way through these imperfect, catastrophic circumstances in hopes of coming out the other side, surviving it. But then also the optimist in me wants to consider the fact that maybe we can come out on the other side of all of this better than we were before. So that's where I am today. Something that came to mind as I was thinking about the idea of imperfection in this moment is pottery, which may seem a little bit weird, but I promise it's relevant. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with kintsugi. It's this centuries old Japanese art of fixing broken pottery, but instead of rejoining the ceramic pieces with something that's camouflage, like super glue, or something that can like hide in those cracks, the Japanese use this special sap lacquer that is dusted with powdered gold. And so once they finish repairing the piece, there's these beautiful gold lines in the cracks where the pottery was broken that give it this one-of-a-kind appearance. And so the art emphasizes the fractures instead of hiding them. And often it makes the repaired piece even more beautiful than its original state, giving it this new look and kind of a second life. And I think that's a really incredible metaphor for where we are right now. We're broken and kind of in these bits and separated, and the pieces have all fallen apart. Our prior plans are kind of shot. What we thought we were going to do before is not what we're doing now. The way we were before is not the way that we are or will be in the future. And so the sooner we get okay with that, I think we can decide not to let it immobilize us, and we'll be in a better place. So we can take those broken bits and build something better. So I don't know, hopefully that's something that resonates with you guys as you feel the brokenness, that will give you a little bit of inspiration to help start putting the pieces back together. So like the last chat, if you were here, I want to start by sharing a few observations that I've been sharing with my clients and friends and some of my team, and then we'll move into Q&A. I want this to be about what's on your mind and not only what is on my mind. So please take advantage of the Q&A buttons at the bottom of your screen. If you joined last time, something that's new this time is that we've enabled the chat feature. So you can actually pop into the chat and say hi and let me know that you are here, and also see who else is here. So please pop in, say hi. And as we're talking, if you have links to things that are inspiring or related points that you want to make, feel free to chime into the conversation in the chat feature also. So hey guys. So let's see, the 5 quick things that I wanted to share with you that I am thinking about right now Hopefully they'll be useful tips for you. It's so hard to navigate all of this, and I really spend a lot of time thinking about what might be useful to the people that are joining. So your feedback is always appreciated, but hopefully these 5 quick things will resonate, and then we can jump into some of the things that are on your mind. The first thing that I want to talk about is taking a minute to relearn your audience. If you haven't already, you should take a step back right now and reacquaint yourself with the people in your audience. I would first start internally. This is an audience that a lot of people often overlook, but you have this automatic focus group right there with your teams and your employees to figure out what people are going through, what they're thinking about, what they're struggling with, what they're doing, what they're reading, what they're listening to, the decisions they're having to make, the things that are hard for them right now, how their behaviors are changing. You can learn that and apply that to your external audience from just by asking your team the right questions. But then I wouldn't stop there. Don't be afraid to reach out to your external audiences to see how they're doing and what they're facing. Perhaps maybe consider something like a listening tour. There's really a lot of power in just asking, how are you doing right now? If you mean it, if you really stop to listen and it's not just a gesture. And then you can also ask the right questions while you're checking in on them that might give you the answers that you need to help you move ahead. So imagine if you stop to say, how are you doing? And you listen to what their needs are right now. Maybe you can serve that need in some way, and that'll start to give you some of those ideas. I suggest also taking it kind of one step further once you've started to ask some of those questions and listen in, and think about developing some new definitions around the personas in your audience. So some of you may have never done a persona exercise. It's a really common practice in marketing and branding. So hopefully a lot of you have had the chance to stop and develop personas for the organization that you're working with. If you haven't, I'm happy to chat about persona development offline anytime and give you some of the tools that we use to do that. But for those of you who have, you probably know your audience ecosystem is something like your patrons or ticket holders or actual audience members or your visitors, whatever that, depending on what you do, whatever that obvious customer is. Then you have people like your board of directors, your major donors, and things like that. But how can you break those into deeper categories with more specific groups that will help you really get into the shoes of your audience right now in the middle of this catastrophe? Like, now I start to think about, probably because I am one of them, the moms who are working moms who now maybe are without childcare and are just trying to keep up and worried about their kids learning at the same time as they're worried about keeping their jobs going. So there's that whole demographic, and overlaying that into some of your audience groups. Then there are different, I mean, you can go a lot of different directions with this, but there are people who are just like, whatever, I'm just hanging out. There are these amazing people who are pivoting and innovating and really shifting what they're doing to fit a whole nother need out there right now, which is incredible. So you might have these like survive it pivoters or innovators, or the tell me what to do crowd. That's a whole nother crowd that's just like, tell me what I should be doing right now. And then there's a lot of people out there who are just paralyzed in this moment. So I think if you can take a step back and kind of apply some new information to the people in your audience, this should help you better make decisions, because it will automatically allow you to better relate to the unique people in your audience and how this is affecting them. So that's the first thing, is take a step back, ask some questions, listen, maybe redefine your audiences a little bit for what they are right now, because there's a whole lot of different context that needs to be applied. The second thing is to just get real. I try to remind myself of this 10 or 15 times a day. I don't need to maybe sugarcoat things or overly polish things. The thing that I'm finding is really resonating with people right now is just getting out there and sharing the information that you have right now and not waiting until you have a complete set of information. So whether you're a corporate brand, a nonprofit, a freelancer, it doesn't matter. Anyone in business is appealing to human beings. And we are all people going through the same shit. We all have families, we have responsibilities, we have worries, we have new challenges and obstacles. And there's no difference between the brand, the humans running the brand, the humans running the organization, and the humans that you're trying to solicit donations from right now. So the more you can connect with them in that real way and say, hey, I know what you're going through, here's what we're going through, the better. I think if there's ever been 3 keywords that brands should apply universally, there is now. And those 3 keywords would be vulnerability, realness, and empathy. You just really need to relate to your audience. And that'll be easier if you've taken that first step and kind of redefined the audience and thought about where they are right now. You might have more in common with them than you ever have because of this connection that we have through this pandemic. So ask yourself before you hit send on an email, before you post, before you Zoom, before you go to the effort right now, because we need to conserve our energy, does the audience need to hear from you right now? And if so, why? And why does this matter to people right now? With whatever context you've thought about on what they're going through, and take those steps before you start to put something out. The third thing is to get your leadership out front. And I kind of lightly touched on this on the first web chat, but people are really desperate for vision and answers in any time of crisis. And in this particular scenario, we don't really have a main focal point. So we have things like the CDC or the World Health Organization for health information, but that's so incredibly global that it can be intimidating and really hard to relate to. So where do you go beyond those facts? And not to get too political, because that's not what this is about, but we don't have national leadership right now that anyone, and this is a generalization, but that really anyone trusts. So in my own listening tour, I'm seeing real clarity that people are just desperately seeking guidance and collecting little bits of information, at least as much as they can stand to, because there's also some fatigue in that. But then they're just collecting that information so that they can make informed decisions in the middle of this really vast unknown territory. So I would get your CEO or some of the top people on your leadership team out in front to share what they're going through, what's the state of the organization, what they're thinking about, how they're planning to the degree that they can plan to move forward. It doesn't have to be a complete or perfect picture. That is resonating. So I would encourage your leadership to get out and kind of step in front of the camera or to be more visible in whatever way possible during this time. And it's not only an opportunity to lead, it's also an opportunity to really deepen loyalty with your audience by shortening the connection between your audience and your visionaries. That's not something that often happens. There's usually like some lines of gatekeeping, and I would just tear the gatekeeping down and put them out there. It's going to be something, a special bond will form in this moment of crisis. So the next thing is to throw the trash out, but not replace the bag. So this is a metaphor that I came up with the other day when I was talking to a client who is really primarily event driven. And they're wanting to just kind of like immediately do the obvious shift and turn their events to virtual events. everybody needs to take a breath and just slow down a minute on this, because now is the moment when expectations go out the window and you don't have to do the things you did before. So that might be, you might be in a position where you inherited an event, or you inherited something that never really quite seemed like the right thing for your organization to be doing. Or how many times have I heard boards that are really demanding have a young professionals group? There's a million young professionals group out there. Everybody feels like they have to have a young professionals group. Everybody feels like they have to have a blog. Now is the time where we can throw that stuff out and decide what really matters for the organization. What we do now is setting up the way that business will work in the future. We're building these new habits that might hold forever. So this is an area that we're thinking about every day, and magic takes time. So I don't have all the answers, but we don't have to have all the answers when it comes to how people should reinvent their events that are no longer possible. It's a case by case basis, and it comes down to your mission and your vision and your North Star and your why. So I would just recommend, it's a panic stricken situation to go from an organization who depended on these things or got into some of these habits to not being able to do these things. But try not to let the panic drive you. Be sure to build in some time for innovative thinking and brainstorming, and include a lot of people in those brainstorms, because reinventing yourself is not easy. Otherwise, we would have a lot of Madonnas on our hands. Reinventing is an art. So I would include a lot of people in the rethinking of some of these structural things that were built in to your processes and your fundraising, and to include people that you may not normally include in that brainstorm, and make sure that they know that the craziest ideas are safe and that nothing is off limits, and really just open that up and keep it broad. And then the last thing, and which is why we're here, or why I'm here for sure, is to not go it alone. And this means us all being in this together and connecting with maybe competitors or mentors or peers or friends, whatever you need in the moment to share advice and kind of information swap on what you're going for. But also to think about really radical transparency during this time, knowing that as a leader, if you're in a leadership position, not to hide your fear or the reality of the situation. The more your employees know the challenges that you're facing, the more likely they are to help you identify opportunities. And this can relate to your external audiences too. You don't have to have all of the answers, and that's a thing that I struggle with as a leader, and I'm sure is pretty common in leadership. We look inward until we have the solutions and everything is perfect so that we can build confidence with our teams, but we've got to let go of that a little bit in this time. Being a good leader really means enabling your people to be their best and most helpful selves, and that's why we're here today, and why I want to open up to Q&A and some of the chat comments now. So let's talk about what you want to talk about. First, thank you for all of the people who sent questions in advance. That's always really nice because it gives me a minute to think about some of your questions and not just answer with the first thing that pops into my head. I won't be able to get to all the questions, but there were a couple that I wanted to get to that, that were submitted in advance. So Jen from Harris County Public Library asked, we rely on small businesses for donations for our summer reading program. When is it okay to ask for donations? This was my first question I wanted to answer because so many of our clients are asking us this, and I know there are a lot of nonprofits on the call. So, you know, the world can't stop, and our most vital programs really require fundraising. That's a given. So we have to keep asking for money. We have no choice. And now we have even greater urgency because it is key to, it's always key to our survival, but it's key even more now to our survival with all these external factors jumping into our path. So I would say it's okay to ask now, and let me caveat this with, I'm not a fundraiser. We work hand in hand with fundraisers, and there are a couple of fundraisers on the call. It's okay to ask now, but it has to have context, both your context and their context. And I think their context is one that oftentimes people who are struggling with fundraising forget to mention. So why are you asking right now in this sensitive time? What's your context? How can you show that you know what they're going through and respect what they're going through as you're asking? So how should the ask change? Is it easier for people to give less, maybe? Is there some reason that you can make it feel urgent for them now also, because we know it's urgent for you? How can it also feel urgent for them? And so, like, even specific to Jen's question for the library, there's lots of parents who are homeschooling now who never have before. Do they appreciate the library even more because they're reading to their kids more? Is there something new that you could give to your donors that would feel useful or comforting right now while they are stuck at home, while they can't come necessarily to the library? And then on top of this, I would say just extra honesty and authenticity, not this like buttoned up, polished ask. I think the more you get real with like, this is what we're going through and this is what you're going through, and here's why we should work together to help each other, is really important. Nicole from the Houston Parks Board asked, how do you activate people when they are being forced to stay home? $1 million question. So the first thing I would do is ask what you need to accomplish besides just raising money. We know that nonprofits all have to raise money. Realizing not everyone else is in the same boat. There's a whole lot more clutter and noise, realizing everyone else is in the same boat. So all of you on the call predominantly, and then the 27,000 other nonprofits in Houston, everybody is trying to stay in touch with their audience in these circumstances, trying to activate in these circumstances, trying to raise money in these circumstances. So there's a whole lot more clutter and noise coming at people in their already really fragile state. So all of that is channeling through their screen. You know, before we used to have a lot more diversity in our options with that. It wasn't all the clutter in one place. It was clutter spread out across all of the mediums. So now it's all really more concentrated, and then everybody's doing it at the same time. So I would take a moment to reevaluate your audience and connect with what's happening in their lives, and then align that as best you can with their mission. So in the case of the Parks Board, that's appreciation of parks and green spaces. There might be something community driven and experiential that you could do. I don't know, could you get people to make their own like yard park? Or I don't know if you saw the parklet movement 5 or 6 years ago where people turned parking spots into parks. So maybe there's something experiential that you could do that keeps like the community spirit going, that keeps people connected, that keeps people like contributing to the movement of appreciating what our parks and green spaces have to offer. Or maybe it's more of a digital campaign where you get everyone online talking about parks and green spaces and what they contribute to our city. I don't know. Right now, I think one of the most important things the Parks Board can do is keep people inspired and also keep them safe. That's been a big topic of conversation that I know you guys have been involved in. A lot of people aren't thinking about outdoor safety because they feel like they're in fresh air, and the Parks Board is doing a great job to really take a leadership role in educating and making sure people stay safe out there. So it's a tough question because we can't activate in the way that we used to, but I think there are lots of options, and you just, I would move slow in making some of those decisions and try and be as creative as possible. Brittany Howd asked from Alpha Graphics, how have I gotten out of my head to move forward with something I haven't ever done? So I'm a masochist and I really love doing things for the first time. This is my favorite kind of challenge. And so I struggle with answering this question because I know that not everybody is like that, but I actually quit my old job and started Black Sheep because somebody told me that we shouldn't do things that we haven't done before. And I was like, that is the whole premise for being. So anyway, trying to connect with you on that, I would say, run it. Okay. So I have been a mess. I mean, like, let's be real. I have 2 small children and life has been hard dealing with all of this and trying to make sure my business survives. So it's been harder than usual to be excited about doing something new because there's a lot of external factors beating me up. And I would say it took me 3 weeks before I could figure out how to exercise again. And I just was trying to survive. And I started exercising last Friday. I started running and running and just walking, whatever it is. Exercise is really helping me. It helps me clear my head, and it helps me like kind of pound out some of the aggression and stress, and that automatically getting that out of the way helps me think better. Something like meditative where you can focus. I don't know if you've ever heard the theory about like shower thoughts or a thing, and they happen because you're focused on this sort of like mindless activity of bathing. And so how can you recreate that and give yourself the room to think is important. The other thing is I'm just like really loving more than ever talking to people, connecting with people that I hadn't, I might not have had time to connect with before. I just would like to just pick up the phone and talk to everybody right now. But like, especially connecting with mentors or friends or people who can help you get unstuck. Sometimes just like maybe get a glass of wine or a glass of water or whatever it is and go sit outside. This weather is really doing us some favors right now, and just start trying to talk it through with somebody. And that's really helped me. I had one of those calls the other day where we just started talking, and at the very end of the call, we came up with a huge idea. And it was just so unexpected because we just started talking and didn't really have a plan. So, other people can often see things that you can't see because you're too close to it. So I would say, let some other people help you figure it out too. Let's see. Katrina asked, we've reached a point in this pandemic where we are beginning to think about what to do with future events that might be outside of the pandemic zone, like the 4th of July fireworks, fall vendor pop-ups. Do you predict people to be worried about crowds, and how can you ensure comfort and safety during those events when there's so much importance in activating to try to support businesses who need those sales and activity to survive after reopening? Wow. I do. I have had many conversations with good friends about how we've got to get out of the mode of remembering what life was like before or wishing for things to go back to normal, because we're not going back. We're not ever going back to the way that things were before. This context will live with us forever. And there will be fear. So I had a great conversation with my best friend the other day, who is a complete social butterfly, has to be out socializing all the time. And I'm kind of like an extroverted introvert. I love being at home. I'm really enjoying some of this home time, but I also do like networking is a huge part of who I am. And I also love to go out and see people and socialize and things like that. And she was talking, we were supposed to take a trip together to California, and I was talking to her about, can you imagine the next time you're on an airplane? And I honestly, I cannot imagine being on an airplane. And I fly everywhere all the time. I flew with my son when he was 6 weeks old. Like I'm fearless when it comes to travel. And I really can't imagine being on a plane again. So we talked through that, and she was the opposite. She really wants to be out. She's anxious to be out. And so I think there will be different categories of people. So some persona development on that end, as you're trying to think about these events, could be useful as well. Going back to my first point, starting to think about the people who will be just so excited to get back out, and it'll be like this never happened. You know, some people are staying home only because the city is telling us to. So you've got different categories of people, and I think developing plans that will be comfortable for all levels of those folks will be important. And having a plan B, a plan C. 4th of July makes me really nervous. I don't think we're going to be there. And if we are, I do think it'll have a very different turnout than you're expected. So diversify your plans as much as you can. And man, that's a big question. I wish I had more time to go back to it. We are actually out of time. So I'm sorry. I love all the comments. I'm excited to see, read into some of those and answer some more of your questions. Our next event, we're having another web chat series that I wanted to tell you about that's going to be a little bit different, but still very relevant to doing what it takes to support each other and the future, and particularly Houston, and that's the census. So next Wednesday on the 29th, we're hosting a conversation with our creative director and designer, Joe Skillman and Bill Ferentz, who will lead the conversation. They did the creative work for Census 2020, and they're going to discuss the process and problem solving around this critical work and how you can be involved in making sure the census is well completed in Houston, because thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars count on us having an accurate count. So I hope that you'll join that. And then after that, I will be back with another live chat with a very cool guest, talking about some of these same issues and kind of, you know, whatever we're seeing in a couple of weeks that is floating to the surface, where I can provide strategic brand guidance and communication advice. So I really appreciate you guys joining. It was really good to see your names flying by on my screen, and I'd love to hear from you again and see you again here. So thanks, guys. Have a good day. Hang in there.